Okay, hello. I think we are live, given the red light in the top of my screen. My name is Václav Pavlín, and I would like to present our topic, Waku Web Apps, which we have worked on with Gabriel and Pedro. What was it about? We've built a bunch of web apps lately, and we were thinking, what can we do with them, and why are we doing that? So we all came up with a document describing our thoughts on this, and then we compiled it into this presentation. So we work on top of some assumptions. The Waku network, the official spec'd out network that we use for all the goodness, is currently broken. We've announced it. We talked about it in our Discord. I'm not going to go into details why it's broken, but it's going to be fixed soon. And our assumption is that the Waku network works, and that's where we can build more web apps, but it has to work. So we assume the Waku network works. Second assumption is that if we talk to people about our web apps and we push them into building it and we give them ideas what to build and help them build it, we assume that messaging API exists and is working and is well defined. It's somewhat defined and it's being built, and we would love it for it to exist. And when it exists, it will be much easier. So that's our next assumption. And then our last assumption is that users and developers care about privacy and censorship resistance. I think they do, but it's the number of users and developers that do care. Because if it's not enough, then like building anything and pushing anything in front of people does not really make sense. Waku is all about privacy and censorship resistant. Well, not all about, but it's the core values. So we also need to make sure, or we also need to assume that users and developers care about these values. So that's why they built on top of Waku. Otherwise, they can just use AWS or any other alternative. So what key values we can bring from building Waku, building web apps with Waku, or what values can Waku bring to web apps that we build? One key point is no infra. So Waku should be able to provide a browser-native peer-to-peer alternative to centralized backends. What does it mean is that there is something called Firebase or Supabase or Pocketbase, the Go implementation of that. And it's basically a way for people to kind of synchronize the state across multiple instances, collect user data, store user state. And we know this works fine, but it's centralized and non-private. And we want to offer an alternative. Waku can do that. And it can be kind of no infra because I can just build the app and connect to Waku network. But there are some things that need to be there. We need to figure out the patterns. We need to figure out how to actually sell it to people, essentially, that Waku can be alternative to these options. So if you think about building something where two users need to synchronize, you would normally use Firebase, and you would make sure that they have some common identifier in the database. But in Waku, you can just use a content topic and do the similar thing. It's just going to be ephemeral, and it's going to be private and censorship resistant, hopefully. We want to provide a Web2 like user experience. So that's a key value that we need to provide from Waku to the web apps. For example, what we are doing with Kwaku and OPChain and Whisperbox and other applications, where we use an in-browser key and then we delegate to that key from external wallets, so that user does not have to do what they are used to in all the Web3 apps, where they have to sign every single thing that they work with. We need to be able to provide that in apps working on top of Waku, where they still get all that other benefits. Waku web apps should be easy to wipe code. They are, like, we can use AI. I've been using Lovable and other AI tools for coding with Waku, but it never gets it right. I have to always fix the Waku integration. So maybe we can fine-tune some model, provide some RAG, provide some a model with our code base and get it retrained. Maybe LLM-TXT would work. Anything that helps would be amazing, and we should try to look into that, because it would be great if people could just say, hey, integrate Waku, and then give it some kind of a some kind of a general protocol, and AI would be able to do it for them. We should try to derive architectural patterns from our experiments. So many of the apps that I have built personally kind of share some patterns. Maybe there is some commonalities in what do I need to store locally and how. Maybe there are commonalities, how do I work with identity? How do I work with querying the store and confirming things? So some of that may be built into messaging API. Some of that we have not discovered yet, but we should. The key value of building and not more web applications and maintaining them and making them better is, among other things, deriving these architectural patterns, which are very common in Web 2 world, but not that common in Web 3. If we build more web apps or we make our current web apps better, we can provide good examples to community rather than giving them some artificial example, which may be good enough, but we can give them something more complex, but also directly consumable, directly reusable for other things. And hopefully with learning how to build web applications and other applications on top of Waku as a team, we can provide guidance for other devs that are not using fully decentralized technologies like peer-to-peer networks, and they rely on some centralized cloud. We can teach them how to become more resilient, and we can increase their resiliency. So who is our target audience for these applications? So I think one target audience is Logos community. Logos is trying to build a huge community of people caring about blockchain communities and network states and movements and grassroots and hacktivism and all these things. We should scout that community for ideas. So like, what do you want to see built? If we want to build something, we don't know what would be used by other people, we can ask the Logos community potentially. We can survey them. Another piece of target audience is IFT and Logos CCs. We've already done that with, for example, OPChain and Whisperbox. Talking to our colleagues, talking to IFT teams, figuring out what is missing, what is centralized and could be decentralized, and just building that and then maintaining that, making it work for us would be a good way forward. And it would immediately give us a user base as long as we can provide a good MVP application and then build it forward. And then hackathon participants and builders could be our good target audience, where they could learn from our examples. So, for example, now there was a Web3 Privacy Now hackathon, and some people built Open Lavatory, which is a wallet connect, like a WC water closet goes to Open Lavatory as a transitive metaphor. They tried to build it with Waku, it didn't work for them, but they wanted to build it with Waku. So if we have examples in the context of these hackathons, people can just go, we can send them the links, and people can build similar stuff or build on top of our existing examples. And it works vice versa as well. Whatever has been built, we can take, improve, learn from these hackathon participants, so we can become the audience of these. And we should definitely. So what are the current challenges of building Waku-based web applications? Arlen user experience. Obviously, we rely on Arlen as a service right now. When we want to use Arlen by itself, so that we generate our proofs in browser, right now the user experience is not there, but it's being worked on, obviously. So that's one challenge I think that everyone comes up with when they learn that there is something like RLN in Waku Network. Like, how do I integrate? How do I use it? Do I need to pay? So we are also looking into other options than payment. Frank just recently wrote a good post on Logos Forum, I think, or WAC Forum about it. What else could we do instead of payment to give people RLN memberships? And I think that there is a good path forward with like liveness checks and ZK passports and all these things to give people RLN memberships rather than paying for it. Another challenge when you're building on top of Waku and potentially also Codex and other decentralized peer-to-peer networks is a change in architectural patterns. So one thing I've realized working on a presentation for an event is that we have taught the next generation of Web3 developers that although they are building on top of a decentralized system, the system is generally accessible through a JSON RPC API, right? With 3 RPC nodes hosted by Infura and all these things, right? So they don't connect to the peer-to-peer network. They go and they query a REST API, well, JSON RPC, but let's say REST API, right? And we can't do that with Waku, or we don't want to do that with Waku. We want to work with the peer-to-peer network directly. And that is a change in architectural pattern, a massive change. And like everything is suddenly eventually consistent or inconsistent, and you need to make sure that you have all the messages in the right order. And what if not? And what if your message has not been sent, and all these things? So again, messaging API will help with that, but it's not a solution to everything. People still have to somewhat understand the change in the patterns. And then things like local first or the identity that I mentioned, all these things change how people have to think about the applications. Another challenge is product market fit. If you think about successful Web3 projects, there is not that many. And whatever we build, like if nobody is using that, it's a nice example, but it's also partially a waste of time. If we can learn from these applications and we can build new protocols for Waku itself and for Codex and whatnot, then it's fine. But we would still like to prefer to have applications that people use. So that's why the target audience is extremely important in building things that people actually can use and would use. Another challenge is maintenance. So if we build whatever we build, we have to maintain it. So we have seen it lately with the JS Waku examples, where JS Waku moves forward quickly. There is a lot of breaking changes, and nobody has been maintaining the examples entirely. Like they have not been updated and they have not been changed. So if we build Waku web apps, we need to make sure that they are maintained, and we want to push them out in front of people. They have to be maintained and updated, and new features and new libraries have to be integrated. That's a lot of work. That's why we need people to use these web apps. We need to build stuff that people actually use, and if they use it, then we will have more incentive to update it and maintain it. The one thing that I've found as a kind of caveat with Waku, you can't use the full potential of Waku without Codex. So there is always a case in almost every application that you need some persistent storage. And Waku Store works, but not completely. There is no SDS, but I'm still skeptical whether it solves all the issues. So you need some persistent storage. So we need to work closely with Codex to make sure that we can integrate these two together, and they will work nicely together, so that when we say, hey, I'll use Waku for this, and people ask, oh, what about sending large files? What about storing all the history of things? What about persistence in general? We can point to examples that leverage Codex properly and that have all these things integrated as well. So what is the current state of Waku web apps? What does it even mean? What it is? So we have had an internal hackathon where a bunch of projects came out of. I am not sure if anyone actually is maintaining any of these. So the only one that I mentioned here is Whisperbox, because I know I have done some work after the hackathon on that. If you have done, or if like anyone has done work on one of these applications, please let me know. Then we have Kwaku, which now still has to be fully integrated into the UI. It's like 70% done. We are building OP-Chain, so somewhat a 4chan decentralized alternative to 4chan style decentralized alternative to Bloggers Forum that we would like to have and push in front of people. And then Trollbox has been built lately as just a very simple POC, but there seemed to be interest in such a simple integration of chat without any persistence into websites. So we're gonna probably build more features into it, maintain it further. We obviously don't have all the assumptions that we have put in the beginning met yet. So the Waku network is not working. Messaging API is being developed. It's not a blocker for us, the messaging API. It's more a blocker of like, if we want to get people on board it's tough to keep explaining to them like, hey, you need to use this protocol and this protocol and this protocol and do that and do that. And there is messaging API coming later this year that is going to solve all of that, right? So it's more of a, like, for us internally, not a blocker at all. For pushing Waku in front of people, it's hard if we know it's coming. It's hard to try to convince them to use the current protocols if they can just wait a couple months to have something much more simpler. So that's mainly that. And then what are the next steps? So we'll keep building. If you have an idea for an application, please do build it. If you don't want to build it, if you don't know how, if you don't have time, don't want to spend time on building your idea, write it down, put it on Logos forums. There is at ideas tag it, post it on social media. Let me know. I will be happy to either help you or just build it or just find someone who will build it, right? What should we be building? So there was a question, whether should we be building Web2 clones or Web3 enhancements or just completely new applications that nobody has ever heard of. And I think we should be building all of those. Web2 clones have a massive benefit. You already have all the requirements. So even if you want to build a POC, that's what I did with Waku. Like I never really used Slido, but I've seen it at conferences. I was like, that's simple. I can do that. So I thought about like, okay, what do I need? What does it have to do? And you already have all your requirements because you have a kind of a template, a blueprint for your application. So we should keep building Web2 clones. I think it's very valuable. You can also describe and show how these decentralized and privacy-preserving technologies improve the existing models of popular applications. We should work on enhancing Web3 applications. So I mentioned Wallet Connect signaling. So that's basically what the Open Laboratory was building, what Frank and Kai Chao, I think, were building during our internal hackathon. This is still unsolved fully, and that's something we should have. We should just be able to do it. Fileware's collaboration. They use centralized server for collaboration and exchanging WebRTC information for people who wants to do live collaboration in Fileware's documents. It should just be Waku. So whenever you see a Web3 app that seems, or you can probably say it's using some centralized server to do stuff, think about how you can improve it, how we can improve it, how we can rebuild it so that it actually uses decentralized stack all the way, right? And then local and niche apps, extremely valuable, but also very hard to come by unless you are one of these people, whistleblower, hacktivist, expert at secure communication. So if you are, or if you know people, talk to them, figure out what they want to be, what they want to get built, and then just let's build it. These are where we need to be because this is what Waku enables. Now with all the wars around the world and internet being shut down in countries and things like that, we should be working on these things, and we should make sure that Waku works in these cut off internet pieces and things like that, right? We should keep maintaining Waku, OP-Chain, Whisperbox, Turtlebox, or if there is anything else. They are good examples, relatively straightforward, very easy to show and explain to people how it works, why it works that way, and put it in front of users. So should probably keep doing that. One thing we could do is try to survey logos, Web3 privacy now, any community that comes to mind. So maybe go to Railgun community and say, hey, if you could build one web application that would use a decentralized stack, what would you build? Go to Web3 privacy now community and let's survey them. Let's say, hey, can you send to your mailing list this survey so that people will fill out the form saying, well, what would you build? What do you need? What sucks? What do you want to see differently, implemented differently? Maybe Web3 privacy now can say, we want to build this, but we don't have knowledge or time, and it's a service or a website that we want to offer to our community, and then we can do it, and we can have a good partner to showcase our technology. I think what we should also do is keep doing the live stream wipe coding. It doesn't have to be web apps. It can be any type of application. Show the libwaku, show the bindings, show the Rust bindings, everything. Show the SDS. Just keep doing it live. I think people like it. People enjoyed it, and we started rebuilding the audience. And I think it's very important to not stop and make engaging content there. One outcome, one result of this exercise that we had is that there should be a list of deliverables for every single new. I have web apps here, but it should be any application that you build on top of the IFT or Logos stack. It should be the application. It should be obviously the thing that people can run. It should, if it's web application, should be deployed. It should be deployed in a way that anyone can access it and who can try it. And there is a link from the post or something, right? It's a discoverable link. There should be a spec potentially. I know that Hanno explicitly and Frank wanted it, so it's now there. There should be, even if it's simple, even if it's just describing how your application works and what are the pieces and what are the components. Keep it simple, but provide a spec. I'll try to do that, I promise. There should be an open source public repository where anyone can go, anyone can start it, anyone can fork it and contribute and submit issues. There should be a Logos forum post. If it doesn't belong to Logos forum, go to VAC forum, go to status forum, anywhere. There should be a public post, long form post with screenshots about your application, which can be shared further. There should be a video. If you don't want to have your face in there, if you don't want to have your voice in there, A, someone else can do it for you. B, you can just record your screen clicking around and then play some music and it's done. It's okay. Like, we don't need anything else. But there should be a video of your application working. There should be tweets and forecast posts, LinkedIn posts, whatever you are familiar or comfortable with. Post it publicly. The Logos forum post should be linked from that. The video should be linked from that. The repo should be linked from that. And we should be able to find and discover these applications, or the community should be able to find and discover these applications. Ask for retweets, ask for reposts. I know other people will be happy to try to give you some more visibility. We are also talking about like where else can we post it? Hacker News, Reddit. If you have ideas, if you have favorite places where to post information about interesting applications, please share it with us. We can put it in some document, and we can have links like where can I post link to my Logos forum post so that I can bring more people to Logos forum, and also I can gain more visibility for my application. And then we also have a awesome Waku repo, which we are not really updating. So we should make sure that all the applications being built are there. And then we can all just send the link to the awesome Waku repo, and people can see all the amazing applications or contribute and add whatever they build. And I think this is my last slide. So that's it. That's all I had to say. So if anyone wants to come up and discuss, or if there are any questions, I have not opened any YouTube channel or anything. So let me know, and I'll answer anything. And if there is nothing, then I will not answer any questions, and I'll be happy as well.
Oh, here come some people. Hold on.
Hello, Fox. Long time no see.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think my main question surrounding building different libraries, different interfaces, different abstractions is how do we choose what to prioritize? Because the design space is potentially infinite. It's very, very wide. And we have to, at the end of the day, we have to decide like, okay, this is the first thing that we're going to work on because potentially this is going to bring, the most impact. So I'm curious if people have ideas of what does that prioritization process look like? How do we make those decisions that say, yes, like it's better to make this kind of API or library first versus trying to target like this kind of use case or this kind of developer?
Others can chime in, but my answer to that would be if you see repeating pattern, then it asks for a library or API, right? Like I have not started with building some kind of identity library for Waku. I've just hacked it into the code. But then we saw it in Whisperbox, and now we see it in OPChain, and we are starting discussing like how can we actually extract that, or does that actually already exist, right? Maybe we should have been using something existing from the get-go. It was just easier to hack it on, and it was more fun, right? That's fine. But once you see a repeating pattern, that's usually when we should start thinking about like, does it need an abstraction? Can we actually abstract it? Obviously, if you are designing something very complex like Jazz is extracting the chat SDK from existing code, like you probably want to think more before you start actually writing code. But if you're just like, I have this idea, I want to try, see whether it works, whether it's doable, then I wouldn't start thinking about like, oh, where do I put all these abstractions and how do I make it sure that it's like modular and I can reuse all the pieces? Just build it and then extract the libraries later if you see that they are useful.
Yeah, I jumped in to talk about the same thing about what are these components that we can probably start thinking about. Completely agree that it doesn't need to be heavyweight at the beginning. I would love a way to kind of capture what those common tasks keep popping up. Obviously I could guess and say, if we're going to go local first, some user preference storage for synchronization across clients and browser tabs would be helpful. I can kind of guess. I think having a place where we just talk about the things that are slowing down developers, and if there was a toolkit that could help them advance, and then as need builds, kind of being able to capture that, I think that would be really helpful.
What I think now that the way you put it gave me a thought. Like, sometimes for me personally, it's hard to think about what slowed me down, but maybe we can come up with some way of like a brainstorming or an interview, like someone asking questions like what you just asked, like, what is this? Why is it there? How, like, have you done the same thing before, right?
Yeah.
And then I would like, oh yeah, actually that's true. I've done that in 3 other applications. So maybe that calls for a more thought and a spec and an actual library. So doing that in pair or doing that in a group might actually be a valuable exercise. And then also it helps other people to understand complexities of some of these applications, probably.
Yeah.
I'm just blind to these things on my own.
That's totally fair. I think, trying to figure out how we can capture the information that we do have so that there's kind of this long running, statistics or however we want to measure it, I think would be really helpful, right? Mm-hmm. I think when there's interop failure, that's a lot easier to drive kind of feature requests, particularly if everyone's creating their own identities. At some point, they'll be like, well, why are all these identities separate? So we'll get a natural drive that way. I think as we get in more about building out tooling for all developers, a lot of that's going to come from where are we spending time in these apps, loosely, not keeping, hours like a lawyer or something, but just kind of I spent a fair amount of time building an identity system for this, or it ended up taking a lot more time. I think that would help give a little bit more insight. And then also, talking to developers as much as possible. Yeah. That goes into previous conversations about making sure the Discord's open to kind of contact people. But yeah, I think that information is super helpful just to know what's out there, even if we're not going to necessarily focus on it at this moment. One of those that once we can see that a lot of people are working on it and we go, oh, maybe that's a ripe tree to try to find some fruit from.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I was trying to capture with the mentioning of like the architectural patterns, because I kind of see that fitting into that, because in Web 2, an architectural pattern for me is like using Auth2, like using authentication providers and how you integrate them. And there is a library for that, and you just use that. You don't think about how it's implemented because you just use that. But we don't really have it in Web3. We have a wallet. And like everybody clicks sign, right, on every single interaction. So maybe that's one pattern. Like, how do you actually integrate a wallet into a web app that is not interacting with blockchain with every single thing? And like, that's one pattern that I can think of. And then you said the settings. I think that's very, very fair. Like, how do I sync my settings in a decentralized manner? Because I don't want to push it into cloud and then sync it with in another instance because I don't have access to it in another instance. I don't want to do that. I want some general version of that. So yeah. These patterns are what I like. I think we are talking about the same thing. I just called it architectural patterns. You're calling it something else. But yeah.
Particularly interested in how we track that, so I'm tractable in the future.
Good.
Love it. Appreciate it, man.
Cher, I don't know if you joined with a question or just joined to show your beautiful face, handsome face.
My questions were asked ahead of me by Arseni and Jazz, but one thing that came of like tying the FOSS presentation to the web apps and what exists already and where people might be able to contribute. And I don't know if this is a thought or a question, but as we showcase these web apps, these solutions, or sort of whatever the implementation is, if we can add a step for every demo or showcase that's created for opportunities for people to contribute and document them in the issues of the repo. And then so like, even if we can, even on first share, have that where you can contribute now, and then and fold in the other booster thing. I think we might be a way to bootstrap some contributions.
I'm hoping that the web apps would be a good funnel to Waku ecosystem and Logos ecosystem, because they should be much simpler than contributing to Waku or even JS Waku, right? Like, the code is complex and it's extremely modular and extremely well written, but it's just a lot of code that you need to understand. And if you're not extremely proficient with JavaScript and TypeScript, you might not be able to. But the web apps usually start relatively simple. So 100%. Ideally, there are some issues that usually are simple. When we finish the POC or we finish the MVP, we can keep some good first issues there. And yes, the repo should be always part of that. Specifically, there is an issue tab on every GitHub repo, right? So like, people should have that habit of like, if I want to take a look at what I could do with that, click there, look at the issues, start, like, send a PR, right? So I think that like, that's a requirement. The code has to be open source, and keeping a few issues open, like non-critical, simple issues, like tweak the button, add a button to do this, would be probably a good way to try to encourage people to contribute something simpler, even though they are not extremely skilled, maybe. But it could give them the first hint of how it is to work with a decentralized tech. SP.
Yes, I wanted to wait at the end. I want to submit to you as maybe a weird thesis I have. Every decentralized apps, as you add features, they all converge to the same thing.
It's all chat.
Yes, but not only chat.
No, it's all chat.
You have to store data somehow. You have to manage identities. You have to communicate either live or async. And then, since it's Web3, there's no barrier into integrating every blockchain you can think of, every other app, every smart contract. There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess.
What is the thesis?
What do you think?
I agree. I mean, yes. So that's what I did. I extracted Kwaku Lib from Kwaku, and I've used it to build a Lightning Talk event management platform. Very broken and very simple, right? But it's a Q&A thing used for some completely different use case, and it generally just works. And I kind of want OP-Chain to be that. Like, I want to encode in OP-Chain messages some weird structure that will actually render as an auction on the forum, right? Like, why not? That's exactly what you're talking about. Like, I just need to integrate some calls to contracts, and I just need to draw a picture of an art that is being auctioned. It doesn't really matter. So I agree. The problem is that we have multiple levels of abstraction, and we don't know where does what fit yet. So we have the communication, which is Waku. We have the persistent storage, which is going to be Codex for us, probably. And then we have SDS for like making sure that our session is kind of cohesive and has some start and an end, and we can know what's in between. We will have some identity. But then, like, what else? Like, what are we, like, how do we derive content topics? How do we do encryption? How do we plug everything together? Do we just encode the structure as a Waku message, or do we have another wrapper, like in SDS, another wrapper for the OP-Chain, which is wrapping another data structure? Like, I don't have answers for that. I agree with you that there is a lot of, like, as you iterate, it gets complex and it gets more generalized, the underlying stuff, and it's just about how you render it. But there is a lot of patterns. We are back to the patterns and back to what we talked about with jazz. Like, we need to be able to find these and build libraries and abstractions for these patterns, and then we can keep remixing and rebuilding applications very quickly and spinning up new versions, new views on the same data with a different point of view, with a different identity, different verification, different knowledge being injected and things being reformed. But we don't know yet what are all these patterns. So that's something we need to start doing better, probably.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say I agree with the need for patterns. I would push back on SP in the sense that everything converges to one single format. I think that there's a handful of patterns, right? There's very symmetric communication that's real time, fast, like kind of like a chat. There's more asymmetric, like an inbound queue if you just want to send, messages to people. Or I think it comes down to the access patterns, the retention periods. That's where you actually start to see the differentiation in all these apps. I think, in general, it is moving data from A to B, but I think the artifacts of how that's implemented actually have an impact. And I think that's where those, conversations kind of ideas come from, where there's a different mechanism or this kind of usage pattern around reliability, retention. Moving through all those, I think, is where you'll get to the differentiation. There's probably 5 different categories, right? Is it anonymous or identified? Is it durable? And the 3 different levels in each one of those categories, I think, gives you probably about 15 different usage patterns that you could look at. How does that sound as a counter argument?
Yeah, I like it.
Let's make it more complicated.
A lot to think about. Yes. Thank you.
I think it's less complicated, or at least that's the intention. When you look at, let's just say, a chat application, a form submission application, and forums, right? Those are 3 different applications that all move data. They're also inherently different. And so I think, having one solution that works for everything is probably where you get the complexity from, rather than actually having, like, are you building a forum-like solution? Then here's a set of tools that helps with that, right? You need more durable information. You probably need some perhaps stronger identity. That'll be up to developers. But I think that just identifying, apps and app movement types would have a huge impact. I realize my previous question was probably silly. The answer is, we look at all the different types of apps that we have in the Web 2 space, and those are the ones we're going to need in the Web 3 space, right? There's probably no generally new way that humans are going to interact in the decentralized space. It's more of a continuation and, adding freedoms on it. And so maybe, the answer is to look at what patterns we see if we want to take all the apps we know and kind of break them all up. And then, it's an issue about prioritization and listening to the community about which ones they care about the most, and kind of building up those infrastructure pieces like identity, durability, and kind of having that in a cohesive framework that people can start to use, rather than having to be godlike, like Václav out there doing it all, and being a masters of everything. So the more we can build, then that's more people who can build on the platform.
Sounds good. That's it.